Today I'm going to give you a seed saving tour in my garden. Each year we save about 80% of the seeds that we use, and our garden's anywhere from a sixth to a quarter of an acre. We mostly garden for our own use, but some years we also do a small market garden for sale. So I'm going to take you around and show you what vegetables that I am saving seeds from this year. All right, the first thing we have coming into the garden here is some celery. And these celery seeds are almost ready for harvest. Most of them are a little green, but some are pretty well dried out and starting to come off the plant. So these celery plants were dug up in the fall. They were overwintered in a little bit of damp dirt in the crawl space under my house. And then they were replanted first thing in the spring. So they bloomed and now they're producing seeds for us. And there's a lot of seed here. This is going to be thousands of celery seeds. So I'll have enough to share, or I could freeze them so that they'll last even longer. All right, so we have lots of sunflowers here. Most of these sunflowers I just let cross-pollinate. I started off with black oil sunflower seeds for my animals. Let's see if you can see them in here. And then I did add in some pretty sunflowers, since I also use these for cutting. I let the two mix, and then I only save seeds from the black oil types. So they are a mix. I get different colors, but they all have this type of seed that's really great for livestock. All right, hiding back here, if I can get to it, we have some beets. I think my ducks came in here and knocked these over. So beets, the same thing. These are a biennial. So the beet roots were dug up in the fall, stored over winter, and then replanted when the ground thawed in the spring. With these, you want to replant. Well, you need at least 6 plants to get good pollination. But sometimes when you replant these roots, they will rot and not take. So you really want to plant more than that to make sure that you have enough for good pollination. And these will cross with other varieties. They can cross with other beets that are in bloom up to a few miles away. So if you are worried about cross-pollination, you can use the bagging technique that we talk about in the course. I typically just grow one kind of beet every year so that I don't have to worry about bagging. When I say grow, I mean for seed purposes. I do plant usually 3 or 4 different kinds of beets in my garden, but as long as they're not in bloom, you don't have to worry about them crossing. See, back here we have some leeks. These have already flowered, so now the seed is forming. Now these were also overwintered in my crawl space and a little bit of damp dirt. I'm in zone 5. Sometimes I can get leeks to overwinter out in the garden. Last year we got down to about -25. And most of them didn't make it out here, but these that were in storage did. So then they were replanted when the ground thawed and they went to seed. You don't want to save seeds from biennials if they bolt and make seeds the first year. These really need to go through winter before they make seed, because that's not a good thing if you're trying to grow vegetables and they bolt. Those aren't genetics that you want to promote. All right, over here with the grapes, I have some onions. Let's see, I think this is a red of Florence sweet onion that is caged. In the course, we talk a little bit about caging. It's honestly not real practical for using on a small scale, but we do it a little bit. So I have 2 different kinds of onions flowering right now, and that's why I have these caged. You either need to remove the cage each evening and alternate which kind of plant will get pollinated. So these would get pollinated one day, and then the next day they would be covered and the other kind would get pollinated. Or you can use this just at the end of the season if you stagger your plantings a little bit. So this is just some window screen material that I zip tied onto some giant tomato cages. A really simple way to make a cage to keep the insects out. And I actually picked up this material at a yard sale for $3. But you can find it at a hardware store or just take apart an old window screen. So here are some other onions. These are blooming and getting pollinated right now. There's a bee at work. You can see it. And this is a red Weathersfield storage onion. So these were planted about a month after those Red of Florence onions. So they just started flowering when the Red of Florence is about done. That's why I alternated caging for a little bit, and then I just put the cage over on the first onions to bloom that are pretty much done now. So now these can get pollinated every day. All right, out here we have some corn. This is Painted Mountain flower corn. I do pick out the color kernels that I want each year because Painted Mountain is a mix. The breeder basically took all of the Indian corns that he could find and mixed them together, and then selected the hardiest plants that did the best here in Montana. And this is called the corn that will grow anywhere. The plants aren't real tall, so they don't put a whole lot of energy into the height of the stalks. They put more of their energy into producing an ear. So if you have a drought or you have a short season, you can still get a crop out of these. I have probably 200 plants this year. So that is plenty to get seeds from. They're going to get the pollen from the entire field here. So I don't have to save 100 ears to avoid inbreeding depression. 100 is the minimum number of plants for corn, since corn gets easily inbred. But since these ears have been pollinated by so many plants, I could just save probably 10 ears for seed. And that would be plenty. So this is mostly white Painted Mountain corn. Since this is such a broad gene pool, I'm going to get other colors in there. But we like to select for mostly one color each year so that our cornbread and other corn products don't taste as, they kind of get muddy if you mix all of the different colored corn together. But that will avoid the muddy flavor. I also have sweet corn this year. My sweet corn was planted about a month later, so that flower corn is pretty much done tasseling, and this sweet corn is just now tasseling. It has pollen on it. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. If I shake it a little bit, the pollen's coming off. Some years we do bag our corn if I really want to make sure that I'm saving pure seed and if it's not staggered well enough. This year I didn't worry about it. I think they're pretty well staggered that cross-pollination isn't going to be an issue here. All right, down here we have cucumbers. I have 3 different varieties. I planted the pickling cucumbers first. We're far enough away from our neighbors that I don't have to worry about contamination. So these pickling cucumbers were blooming before the other 2 varieties. So with these I didn't have to use any hand pollination techniques. Let's see if you can see, there's one. Since I didn't have to hand pollinate, I just picked some of the earliest fruits that set before my other varieties were in bloom. and put a tape around them to remind us not to pick those. So we'll let those get big and huge, and they'll turn kind of yellow at the end of the season. So we'll harvest those in the fall. And cucumber seeds are typically fermented like tomato seeds. So now that I have 3 varieties in bloom, if I want to save seeds from any more cucumbers, I'll have to use taping to hand pollinate. All right, over here we have some other beets, but these are not in bloom, so I don't have to worry about them crossing with my other varieties. And same thing with the onions. This is our main onion area for the year, but they're not in bloom, so they won't cross-contaminate my other onions. And here I have my pole beans. These are, well, probably 10 feet from the end of the bush bean row. My pole beans are just a mix of heirlooms, so I let them cross with each other. With green beans, the recommended distance for isolation to keep different varieties from crossing is just 10 feet. Since these are already a mix, I don't care if they cross with each other, but I don't want them crossing with my bush beans, so I do keep them separate from those. So this was, let's see, rattlesnake, purple potted pole bean. I have a heirloom pole bean that my friend gave me from her family. What else is in here? Marvel of Venice, Gold Marie. This one I don't think is a cross. I think this is an heirloom, but I don't know the name of it. It's similar to purple potted pole bean, but the beans get a little more green on them. I have some that are solid purple and some that are like this. And then we have peppers in here. And of course we talk about how to bag the blossoms of these to prevent cross-pollination. Peppers will cross with other varieties, typically just within a garden space. Most of the time they're not going to cross with your neighbor's peppers. But if you're growing multiple varieties and you want to make sure they stay pure, you can take those little organza bags or get blossom end bags and put them on the flowers before they open, which we do most years to get some pure seeds. We also do the same thing with tomatoes. These are my seed radishes. I actually left the fastest growing radishes when I grew them this spring. I harvested the smaller ones because I wanted to save seeds from the fastest growing ones to promote those genetics for next year. So we have some that are still flowering here and some that are setting seeds. This is going to be a lot of radish seeds. There's probably 30 or more plants here. And each one has a couple hundred of these seed pods. So these seeds are going to last me for years. One thing I cover in the course is that you don't have to save seeds from everything every year. Most seeds will last at least a few years, so you can rotate which varieties and which plants you save seeds from to keep it from getting too overwhelming. This year I did not save any carrot seeds. Let's see, I didn't show you, I did save kale seeds this year, and those did overwinter out here in the garden. This is some that I planted this spring, but the variety that overwintered out in the garden, I moved those plants all to one spot. They're over there by the onions, and they've already set seeds. All right, I'm going to head over to the squash. All right, here we are at the squash patch. I have summer squash and winter squash. There's about 25 different varieties here, so I have to hand pollinate these to prevent crossing. And I already have hand pollinated some. Let's see, here's a zucchini. This was hand pollinated using the taping technique, and then I actually scratched an S into it fingernail, if you can see, so that I know this one was hand pollinated and not to pick it. And it's already, oh, probably triple the size I would normally pick this variety. So we'll leave it on there until the fall when I harvest my winter squash. Over here there's a yellow summer squash that we did the same thing with. It's got an S scratched into it. This is actually volunteer cilantro, but I left that to bloom for the bees. And there's a regular black zucchini. You can see it under there. It's hand pollinated, and then we've got the S scratched into it to remind me not to pick it. And the winter squash is over here. Winter squash is a little harder to hand pollinate than summer squash, just because these vines like to go crazy and crawl all over the place. And when you have a lot of different varieties, you need to make sure that you're getting a male and a female flower from the same variety when you're hand pollinating. I have some in here that I've hand pollinated already. Here's one. It's a long pie pumpkin. It still has the tape on the end here. And I haven't scratched an S into it yet. You could also mark these with tape. The orange flashy tape, like you saw me do with the cucumbers. Anything to remind you that that squash was hand pollinated. And then you don't need to do anything special with it. You just let it grow until harvest time, and when you go to eat it, you save the seeds from it. Winter squash will only, well, and summer squash will only cross with other varieties that are the same species, but many common squash varieties are part of the same species. Zucchini, most summer squash, pumpkins, acorn squash, spaghetti squash, some gourds are all a part of the same species, and they can all cross with each other. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our seed saving course. I'll put a link in the description box. Our course is already really affordable, but you can save an additional 20% with the code SEEDSAVINGSALE.